Hey, what's up everybody? Adobe Masters here, and today I'm going to be teaching you how to render out your footage in Adobe After Effects. Now you might be thinking, why would you need a tutorial on this? Isn't this pretty simple to do? Well, when you actually get down into the nuts and bolts of rendering stuff out, you'll understand that it's really important to understand all the stuff that you could do with it so that you know the best format to export it out in to use later. So for example, you don't want to render it out in lossless footage if you're just going to be uploading it to YouTube straight from here. The reason for that is that lossless will make a 187 megabyte file that you throw in and add a vignette onto 10 gigabytes when it comes out. So that would not be good for YouTube. And vice versa, if you're going to be using it in something really, high def later on, you want that lossless footage so that when you do the final render later on, you don't lose any of the detail or the resolution later on. So I'm going to be teaching two different methods, and that's going to be what I call in-house, which is going to be in After Effects, and that's going to be After Effects' encoder. And then the other one is going to be like out of house, and that's going to be using Adobe Media Encoder, which is Adobe's software that just basically you can render out anything in any format you want. So it's really, really great, and a lot of the times I'll actually send it to here. So let's first go over the stuff in After Effects. So I have this footage here, I threw it in, and then I just threw two little effects on it, so we're actually doing something to it. And then the next step you want to do is you want to click on the composition, make sure it's selected, make sure you're selected down here. Go composition, and then add to render queue. And that's going to be Control-M if you like keyboard shortcuts. Let's just delete this top one off here. So this is the render queue. And what's important about the render queue is it doesn't just start. Like in Premiere Pro, you can kind of just have one of them, and then you render it out, and you go to the next one, render it out, or you can add them to Adobe Media Encoder. But in this one, you could actually render out a bunch of different compositions at the exact same time. So you could line them all up, set all their settings, and click render, and it'll go through one by one by one, rendering them all out. And that's why you put it in the queue, because a lot of times you will be doing stuff like that. But let's get down into just this one right here. So we have three really options that we can choose here, and I guess a fourth one up here if you want to just have a log if you really want to see what it's doing. But we have three major options here. This one is really easy. Click on it, it's going to show you where it's going to be saved to. So just choose the folder that you want it to be saved to, click on it, rename it. Great, good to go. The other one here is the render settings. And a lot of this stuff is on the actual rendering itself. How's it going to do it? Is it going to be rendering out the best? Is it going to be rendering out a full resolution stuff? Is it going to be using disk cache? So it's going to be using a lot of different things. And in all honesty, unless you specifically, look something up and you're like, oh, I have to change one of these settings, I've always kept it on best settings for rendering it out. You're not going to, go off that a lot. Maybe the frame rate, you might have to choose that different sometimes. Other than that, this is pretty straightforward. Keep it on full, keep it on best. Unless you really know that you have to change it, keep it right there. Now the one that you want to be changing here, and it's always just going to go to custom even if you didn't do anything, is the down here into lossless. And so lossless was what I was talking about earlier. It's going to render out, making sure it loses none of the data. It's not going to encode it in any way. It's not going to reduce the size of it in any way. It is going to render it out as big as possible. This is great later on if you're trying to add effects, or maybe you're trying to keep the resolution so that nothing is lost. No amount of detail is lost. But understand that if you have like a 4-minute clip in here, when you render it out, it's probably going to be about 40 gigabytes long or big. So you'll run out of disk space really, really quickly if you have a bunch of these. That will be, and the default is an AVI format. So if you want to do something more YouTube-esque, you could maybe drop this down to QuickTime, and it used to be a little easier than this, but you want to go into the format options after you choose the main format. Then you want to go down into the format options, and then you have the video codecs that you can choose. And what I always choose for this is H.264. It's a really high definition, but really easy to stream codec. So you can choose your codec right here. Understand that each one of these, so like if I go AVI, it's going to have a whole nother set of codecs in here. And you can download codecs offline and actually render them out in different codecs from online by just installing them into Adobe. But yeah, so right here you can really just make your choices. QuickTime and AVI are probably the highest ones you'll choose. Choose one of these, and then now you're set on what you're going to render it out as. The rest of these can stay the same. Again, not going to do it. Not going to change it unless you know you need to change it. Then the audio output. A lot of the times you'll notice it's going to try to output the audio that comes with it. But a lot of times After Effects, you don't really need the audio with it, so you can sometimes just turn this off if you're just going to like, ADR it later, put audio back into it. Other than that, that's basically it for the render queue. Just remember you can just choose different little options here and adjust it accordingly. And then you just click this render button and it's going to start the render. And it's going to save it right in the spot that we put it. It's going to go, and then it has this really weird chime at the very end of it, which you can actually go into the files and change it. I changed it to like a cool little guitar riff because the chime is a little annoying. But yeah, that's After Effects' in-house one. Now, something else that we can do is, let me cancel this render right here, is we can go back into the composition here, and instead of going to add to render queue, we can go to add to media encoder queue. And this is why I said you should probably have this open before you do that, just because it'll take a little while to open this up, and you kind of just want to have the flow going here. And there we go, it made it over. This is along with the Adobe link sort of thing. You know how Premiere can export to After Effects, and then After Effects can bring it back to Premiere. You can edit stuff in Premiere and Adobe Audition. This is just another one of those links. So now we're in Adobe Media Encoder, and what's really cool about this is that it has a bunch of presets. Now, it doesn't have the best way of finding the presets. You can't really search them, so you have to like do this to get down to her. But it has some really, really neat presets. For example, it has YouTube and Vimeo, it has Twitter, it has just regular HDs all the way down the scale, TiVo, Barnes & Noble book, Apple TV. I mean, it has cool presets to render stuff out in. So if you're rendering out a video for YouTube, you could click this YouTube 1080p, and you'll see that it defaults here to H.264. Connecting to the dynamic link server. Any second now. Okay, and then so it's going to open up this thing right here, which actually looks a lot like Adobe Premiere Pro. And in here you can change around your formats and stuff as well, and it actually looks almost identical to Adobe Premiere Pro. So if you're more used to Adobe Premiere Pro, throw it into Media Encoder and then just click right here, and you can open it up, and you've got all your settings just how they are in Adobe Premiere Pro. But yeah, this has a lot more options. I guess it doesn't have more options, but it has more. It's more user friendly, and a lot of times that's really nice. And if you want to add multiple to it, you could actually have like Photoshop open and Premiere Pro open, and then just all of them have a button, export to Adobe Media Encoder. You could have them all lined up here, and then just click the play button, and it'll do all the stuff for you. That about covers it for the basics of how to render out in Adobe After Effects. Hope you learned something. If you got any questions or comments, go ahead and throw those in the comments below. Subscribe to see more Adobe related content, and until next time, guys, see ya.